Every night, when the luxurious Delacroix family mansion fell silent, a young au pair named Elara risked everything. She wasn't stealing jewels or secrets from high society. She was cooking. In secret, in the dark and cold kitchen, she prepared dishes that no one in the house would ever taste. Except one person. What drove this young woman to break the rules in such a risky way? The answer is far deeper and more shocking than anyone could imagine. If you love stories with secrets and exciting plot twists, subscribe to the channel now, because what I'm about to tell you will keep you hooked until the very last second. Elara, a 22-year-old from a small coastal town, had always dreamed of seeing the world and saving money to help her family. The opportunity to be an au pair for the renowned Delacroix family seemed like a golden ticket, a gateway to a life she only saw in magazines. During the interview, Mrs. Delacroix was clear and emphatic. The priority was the education and well-being of her 10-year-old daughter. Lily, the mansion, with its marble corridors and perfectly manicured gardens, was stunning, but Elara soon felt a chill that didn't come from the architecture, but rather from the atmosphere of the house. The rules were extensive and rigid, laid out in a leather-bound manual. There were set times for waking up, studying, playing, and, most importantly, eating. Mrs. Delacroix emphasized that Lily's nutrition was a science, managed by a private chef who followed a restricted, bland, and tasteless menu. Elara, whose childhood had been filled with the aromas of stews and bread baking in her grandmother's wood-fired oven, was bewildered by the absence of smells in the vast, modern kitchen. It was a sterile, functional place, but soulless, just like the meals served there. In the early days, Elara tried to adapt to the quiet, methodical routine. She accompanied Lily to her piano, French, and writing lessons. But the girl seemed like a small shadow, moving through the house with an unusual stillness for her age. Her large, expressive eyes seemed to carry a melancholy that Elara couldn't decipher. Communication between mother and daughter was almost dull-driven, limited to questions about school performance and reminders about table manner. Elara felt like she was caring for a porcelain doll in a giant, empty dollhouse. The turning point for Elara came during dinner in the first week. A dish of steamed fish with asparagus was served. Lily, with her little fork, merely pushed the food from side to side. Her gaze lost out the window. Mrs. Delacroix, noticing the hesitation, said in a firm voice, "Lily, eat. Nutrients are essential for your development." The girl obeyed. That night, Elara couldn't sleep. Thinking about the contrast between that scene and her own memories of family meals, full of laughter and conversation. It was then that the seed of rebellion was planted in Elara's heart. She didn't just see a spoiled child rejecting food. She saw a hungry girl, hungry not only for calories, but for comfort and affection. She remembered her grandmother's words. "Food isn't just for filling your belly, my daughter, it's for warming your soul." Looking at Lily's bedroom door, Elara made a decision. She would risk her job, her dream, for something her instinct told her was far more important: the genuine well-being of that lonely girl. From that night on, the kitchen of the Delacroix mansion would gain a secret life. With simple ingredients she bought with her own money during her rare days off, Elara would begin her clandestine mission. She wasn't just an au pair following rules. She would become a keeper of secrets, a night cook, driven by a compassion that the family itself seemed to have forgotten how to demonstrate. Her plan was risky, but the image of Lily's sad eyes was a stronger motivation than any fear. Elara's first night operation was fraught with tension. She waited until the last sound in the house faded, which usually happened around 11 o'clock, when Mrs. Delacroix retired to her private wing. Her heart pounding, she descended the stairs, each step an echo in the oppressive silence of the mansion. The kitchen, lit only by the moonlight streaming through the window, seemed like a stage awaiting a forbidden play. Elara unwrapped the ingredients she had hidden in her bag: potatoes, carrots, some chicken, and fresh herbs. She decided to start with something simple, yet powerful: her grandmother's chicken soup, a recipe that, according to family legend, could cure everything from a cold to a broken heart. Every movement was calculated to be silent. She peeled the potatoes carefully so the skin would fall gently into the sink, chopped the vegetables over a cloth to muffle the sound of the knife on the cutting board, and controlled the stove flame so that the bubbling of the soup was just a whisper. The aroma that began to fill the air was both a danger and a blessing, a scent of home that didn't belong there. When the soup was ready, rich and golden, Elara placed it in a small thermal bowl. Climbing the stairs was even more agonizing than coming down. She stopped in front of Lily's bedroom door, her breath caught in her throat. She knocked softly, a code they had agreed on earlier that day, with a simple wink. The door opened without a sound, and Lily's eyes gleamed in the dim light as she saw steam rising from the bowl. Elara handed her the soup with a spoon and a napkin, whispering, "Eat slowly. I'll be outside if you need me." Lily sat on the floor of her room and, by the light of her bedside lamp, took her first spoonful. Her eyes closed and a small sigh escaped her lips. It was more than just food. It was warmth, it was flavor, it was something she hadn't felt in a long time. She ate every drop, and when she returned the empty bowl to Elara, a genuine smile, the first Elara had ever seen, lit up her face. In that moment, all the risk, all the fear, had been worth it. Elara realized she was doing the right thing, breaking the rules to fix something that was broken inside. The secret nights became a sacred routine. Elara prepared homemade breads, rustic stews, apple pies, and even chocolate chip cookies. Each dish was a story, a memory from her own childhood that she shared with Lily through flavor. The girl, in turn, began to blossom. Her cheeks regained color, her energy returned, and, most importantly, the melancholy in her eyes began to give way to a sparkle of complicity and joy. They shared a secret that united them in a powerful and profound way. During the day, they kept up appearances. Lily still barely touched the chef's food. But now there was a playful glint in her eye when she exchanged a secret glance with Elara across the dining table. Lily's transformation, however, did not go entirely unnoticed. Her teacher at school commented to Mrs. Delacroix about the sudden improvement in the girls' concentration and participation. The mother, though pleased, couldn't understand the cause of the change, attributing it to the effectiveness of her structured routine, unaware that the real magic happened when the lights went out. As the weeks passed, Elara's confidence grew, and with it, perhaps, a touch of carelessness. The aromas from her nightly cooking sessions, once carefully contained, began to waft through the mansion's corridors. One night, the scent of cinnamon and baked apples from a freshly baked pie wafted up the stairs. A sweet, homely fragrance completely foreign to that setting. Mrs. Delacroix, reading in her suite, wrinkled her nose. She dismissed the thought as something from outside, perhaps a neighbor's house, but the seed of suspicion had been planted. Lily's behavior also began to raise red flags for her caring mother. The girl, who had previously been apathetic, now hummed softly while doing her homework. On one occasion, Mrs. Delacroix overheard her enthusiastically describing to a friend on the phone the best shepherd's pie she had ever eaten, a description that didn't match anything on the chef's menu. When questioned, Lily quickly corrected herself, saying she had dreamed it. The excuse was weak, and Mrs. Delacroix felt a knot of intrigue and suspicion forming in her stomach. Tensions rose when the private chef, a proud and temperamental man, complained directly to Mrs. Delacroix. He noticed that basic ingredients, such as flour and sugar, which he rarely used, seemed to be dwindling in small quantities. Furthermore, he found a small pot, not belonging to his professional set, hidden at the back of a cupboard. Still with a faint smell of vegetable broth, he suggested that perhaps there were rats in the pantry, but Mrs. Delacroix knew the explanation was different. Someone was using her kitchen. She began to observe Elara more closely. She noticed the way the au pair looked at Lily during meals, a mixture of concern and complicity. She saw how Lily, in turn, seemed to seek Alara's approval with her gaze. The connection between the two was stronger than expected, deeper than a simple professional relationship. Mrs. Delacroix, a woman who had built an empire based on control and intuition, sensed that something was happening right under her nose, a secret that was undermining her authority in her own home. The last straw came one sleepless night. Restless, Mrs. Delacroix decided to go downstairs for a glass of warm milk, something she hadn't done in years. As she approached the main staircase, an unmistakable and delicious aroma of freshly baking bread hit her. It wasn't her imagination, it didn't come from outside, it came from her kitchen. The smell was so real, so nostalgic, that for a moment it transported her to another time, another life. But the nostalgia was quickly replaced by a cold fury. Someone was defying her rules. With silent steps, she descended the stairs, her heart pounding with a mixture of anger and curiosity. The kitchen light was on, a sliver of light gleaming under the door. She stopped, took a deep breath, and braced herself for the confrontation. The peace of her home had been violated, and she was determined to find out who was responsible and why. The truth was just one door away, and she was about to open it. Mrs. Delacroix pushed the kitchen door open forcefully. The scene she encountered paralyzed her for a second. There stood Alara, her back to the door, carefully taking a golden loaf of bread from the oven. The warmth and aroma emanating from the bread were overwhelming. A sensory assault of comfort and domesticity that she had banished from her life. Startled by the noise, Alara turned sharply, her face pale with terror at the sight of Mrs. Delacroix's imposing figure standing in the doorway, her eyes flashing with anger. "What do you think you're doing in my kitchen at this hour of the night?" Mrs. Delacroix's voice was low, but sharp as glass. She walked slowly into the room, her eyes darting from Alara's terrified face to the bread on the counter, and then to a pot on the stove where a stew simmered gently. "I gave you clear rules. No one but the chef cooks in this house. You're fired. Pack your things and leave in the morning." Alara opened her mouth to try to explain, to plead, but the words wouldn't come out. Tears welled in her eyes as she watched her future crumble. She didn't care about the job, but the idea of leaving Lily, of abandoning her secret mission, was devastating. She could only whisper, "Please, madam, I can explain, .. double quotes, but Mrs. Delacroix wasn't interested in explanations. To her, it was a breach of trust, an unacceptable act of insubordination. "Explain what? That you've been sneaking around behind my back, using my house for your own whims," she continued, her voice rising. "You were poisoning my daughter with this. This peasant food." She grabbed a napkin and with a disgusted expression made to throw the bread in the trash. Lily stood at the top of the stairs, dressed in her pajamas, her eyes fixed on her mother with a determination Mrs. Delacroix had never seen. She descended the stairs one step at a time, without breaking eye contact. "Food isn't poison." "It's good," she said, stopping beside Alara as if to protect her. "Alara's food ... tastes like love. Like Grandma's cooking." The mention of Grandma hit Mrs. Delacroix like a punch to the gut. The anger on her face wavered, giving way to painful confusion. She looked at her daughter, at the frightened au pair, and at the warm bread on the counter. That smell. It was the same smell of the bread her own mother used to bake every Sunday. The kitchen suddenly seemed less like a crime scene and more like a portal to a past she had tried to bury with all her might. The word Grandma hung in the air, laden with memories and pain. Mrs. Delacroix, whose name was Isabel, felt the facade of coldness she had built over the years begin to crack. Her mother, Lily's grandmother, was the soul of the house where she grew up. A vibrant woman whose love was expressed through steaming pots and the smell of cake baking. The kitchen was the heart of the house, a place of laughter, confidences, and flower-covered hugs. Isabel spent her childhood by her side, learning to knead dough and recognize the perfect point for caramel. But tragedy struck the family devastatingly. Her mother passed away suddenly, and for young Isabel, it was as if the sun had gone out. The kitchen, once a place of joy, became a silent memorial to her loss. The smell of home-cooked food no longer brought comfort, only the sharp pain of absence. In her grief, she made a promise to herself. She would protect herself from this vulnerability. She associated food made with soul with the pain of loss, and upon becoming a mother, extended this distorted protection to her own daughter. She believed that by offering Lily a scientific diet, devoid of emotion and tradition, she was sparing her the same pain she had felt. She thought a sterile menu would create a strong, focused child, immune to the weaknesses of sentimentality. But there, in the midnight-lit kitchen, watching her daughter defend a simple homemade loaf of bread, she was depriving her of the most fundamental language of love she herself had ever known. The tears she had held back for years finally came. She looked at Alara, no longer with anger, but with a shocking understanding. That strange young woman, with her clandestine cooking, hadn't disrespected her rules. She had rescued the soul of her home. Alara wasn't just feeding Lily's body, she was nurturing the girl with the same legacy of affection that Isabel had tried to erase. She was unknowingly reconnecting Lily to the memory and legacy of a grandmother she had never known. Isabel knelt in front of Lily, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry." She pulled her daughter into a tight hug. A hug that was as necessary for her as it was for the little girl. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel, allowed herself to remember. Looking over Lily's shoulder, her eyes met Alara's, and in them, she offered a look of immense gratitude. That night, the kitchen of the Delacroix mansion witnessed not a confrontation, but a healing. The shocking secret was not the au pair's rebellion, but rather the hidden pain of a mother who, in trying to protect her daughter from her own past, almost deprived her of a future full of love and flavor. The aroma of bread was no longer a ghost, but a promise of a new beginning. The early morning hours that followed the confrontation were not silent, but rather filled with gentle agitation. After the tears and the embrace that sealed a new understanding, Isabel, Mrs. Delacroix, didn't send anyone to bed. Instead, with her eyes still moist, she looked at the bread on the counter and then at Alara. "Could you teach us?" she asked, her voice low and humble, a tone neither Alara nor Lily had ever heard. It was a request that went far beyond a simple recipe. It was an invitation for Alara to guide them back to a place of warmth and connection. At that unlikely moment, the kitchen of the Delacroix mansion was transformed. Isabel took off her expensive silk robe, rolled up the sleeves of her designer pajamas, and, for the first time in years, felt the texture of flour in her hands. Guided by Alara, she and Lily learned to knead a new batch of dough, their laughter filling the silence that had previously dominated the room. Isabel shared stories of her own mother, memories she had kept locked away, and Lily listened with wide eyes. Getting to know her grandmother through her mother's words and the flavors Alara introduced them to, her apron stained with flour, was seated at the kitchen table with Lily and Alara, having breakfast of homemade bread and jam. The atmosphere was not that of a mistress with her subordinates, but of a family sharing a moment. Isabel explained the new philosophy of the house. The kitchen would no longer be a laboratory, but a workshop. The chef, initially confused, was invited to collaborate, to fuse his technique with the soul of the family recipes. The transformation of the house was swift and profound. The leather-bound rulebook was symbolically kept in a drawer. The silent, sterile dinners were replaced by noisy, joyful meals, often prepared by the three of them together. Alara, now promoted from au pair to a sort of culinary mentor and honorary member of the family, taught them how to make the pies, stews, and all the dishes that had previously been nightly secrets. Lily blossomed in a way that no rigid routine could ever achieve. She invited friends home, not to show off the gardens or the pool, but to bake cookies with her mother and Alara. She learned that love wasn't just a word, but something you could taste, smell, and share. Her grandmother's legacy was no longer a ghost of pain for her mother, but a living gift that was celebrated daily in the form of food made with affection. The most significant change, however, was in Isabel. She rediscovered joy, spontaneity, and the ability to connect on a deeper level. By letting go of obsessive control, she gained something infinitely more valuable: her daughter's genuine admiration and love. She understood that the greatest wealth she could offer Lily was not an elite education or a life of luxury, but rather the freedom to feel, to savor, and to love without reservation. A lesson she learned from the young au pair who dared to cook in secret. That night, the three of them stayed together in the kitchen. Isabelle, Mrs. Delacroix cut the bread Alara had baked, and for the first time in a decade, shared a simple yet meaningful meal with her daughter. The strictest rule of the house wasn't just broken, it was obliterated by the simple truth that food is more than nutrition. It's memory, it's culture, and above all, it's one of the purest forms of love. Alara wasn't fired. On the contrary, she gained a family, and the kitchen, once cold and silent, became once again the beating heart of the Delacroix mansion. The story of Alara, Lily, and Isabelle reminds us that sometimes the bravest acts are acts of kindness done in secret, and that the deepest wounds can be healed by the simple warmth of a dish made with love. What did you think of this journey? Which dish reminds you of the taste of home? And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe for more soul-warming stories.